The golden age of muscle cars in the 1960s and early 1970s was a time of raw power, aggressive styling, and affordable high-performance vehicles that thrilled car enthusiasts. These were the years when Detroit's Big Three, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, ruled the streets with legendary machines like the Ford Mustang Boss 429, the Chevrolet Chevelle Estes, the Plymouth Hemi Cuda, and the Dodge Charger R/T. But seemingly overnight, this era came crashing down. The muscle car was on life support, and one major event delivered the killing blow: the oil crisis of the 1970s. What exactly happened? How did gas prices and government regulations dismantle an entire automotive movement? And most importantly, could the muscle car era have survived under different circumstances? Buckle up, because we're about to take a ride through history and find out. The birth of the muscle car era. The muscle car phenomenon wasn't just about speed, it was about attitude. In the 1960s, American car manufacturers discovered a formula that was impossible to resist. Take a mid-size car, stuff a massive V8 engine under the hood, and offer it at a price that everyday people could afford. It all started in 1964 when Pontiac introduced the GTO, a lightweight Tempest with a 389 cubic inch V8. The response was electric, and soon every major automaker was rushing to build its own version of the muscle car. The market exploded with high horsepower models that turned suburban streets into drag strips. Insurance was cheap, fuel was abundant, and speed was king. But what the automakers didn't see coming was a crisis that would flip the entire industry on its head. The oil crisis of 1973, the beginning of the end. The year 1973 changed everything. The United States had long depended on foreign oil, particularly from the Middle East. But when the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries decided to impose an oil embargo on the U.S. due to its support of Israel in the Yom Kippur War, gasoline shortages hit America hard. Almost overnight, fuel prices skyrocketed. People lined up for hours at gas stations, hoping to fill their tanks before stations ran dry. Rationing was introduced, and for the first time, Americans had to face the harsh reality that fuel might not always be cheap and readily available. This was a death sentence for muscle cars. Suddenly, gas-guzzling V8s weren't just impractical, they were unsustainable. Government regulations and the death of horsepower. If the oil crisis was the first punch, government regulations delivered the knockout blow. In response to rising fuel prices and growing environmental concerns, the U.S. government introduced new fuel economy and emissions regulations that forced automakers to rethink their vehicle designs. The corporate average fuel economy standards, introduced in 1975, required automakers to meet strict fuel efficiency targets. At the same time, new emissions laws forced manufacturers to install catalytic converters and lower compression ratios, which strangled engine performance. The results were devastating. Muscle cars that once roared with 400-plus horsepower now struggled to break 200. The once mighty Chevrolet Camaro Z/28 was nearly neutered, while cars like the Ford Mustang II and Pontiac Firebird Formula were shadows of their former selves. Insurance companies drive the final nail in the coffin. As if rising gas prices and government restrictions weren't enough, insurance companies saw muscle cars as high-risk machines that encourage reckless driving. In the late 1960s, insurers began dramatically increasing rates for high-performance vehicles, making it nearly impossible for younger buyers, who were the backbone of the muscle car market, to afford coverage. What good was a 426 Hemi-powered Dodge Challenger if it cost more to insure than to buy? This shift further crushed sales, as many enthusiasts were forced to settle for lower performance models or abandon muscle cars altogether. The rise of economy cars, a shift in consumer preferences. The American mindset was shifting. No longer were big V8s the dream cars of young drivers. The oil crisis made fuel efficiency a top priority, and Japanese automakers like Honda and Toyota capitalized on this by offering small, fuel-efficient, and reliable cars. Models like the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla quickly gained popularity, proving that performance was no longer the only factor buyers cared about. Meanwhile, Detroit struggled to adapt. Muscle cars had always been about power first and economy second, but now the tables had turned. What if the oil crisis never happened? Would muscle cars have continued to evolve into even faster and more powerful machines? Would we have seen street-legal cars pushing 600 or 700 horsepower decades before modern supercars? It's possible. Some automakers were already experimenting with radical performance ideas, like turbocharging and fuel injection, which could have revolutionized muscle cars much earlier. But the reality is, change was inevitable. Even if the oil crisis had never occurred, government regulations and rising insurance rates would have eventually forced muscle cars to evolve. The crisis simply accelerated the downfall. The muscle car resurrection, a new hope. For nearly 2 decades, the muscle car was a ghost of its former self. The 1980s saw some attempts at performance revival with cars like the Buick Grand National and Fox Body Mustang, but they still lacked the raw power of the 1960s legends. It wasn't until the late 1990s and early 2000s that muscle cars truly made a comeback. With advancements in engine technology, fuel efficiency, and emissions control, cars like the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, Chevrolet Camaro ZL1, and Ford Mustang Shelby GT 500 proved that American performance was alive and well. These modern machines offer the kind of horsepower numbers that muscle car fans of the 60s could only dream of, but with one major difference: they're built for today's world. The muscle car legacy, why it still matters today. Despite the setbacks of the 1970s, the muscle car left an indelible mark on automotive history. Even today, they represent more than just speed. They symbolize rebellion, freedom, and the pursuit of raw, unfiltered driving excitement. The passion for these cars remains strong, with enthusiasts restoring and preserving classics from the golden era. Car shows, drag races, and even modern muscle car clubs keep the spirit alive. And as long as people love the roar of a V8, the thrill of acceleration, and the nostalgia of a time when horsepower ruled the streets, the muscle car will never truly die. Electric muscle cars, future of high performance. As the world moves towards sustainability and automakers shift their focus to electric vehicles, the future of muscle cars is being rewritten. The rise of electric power has already begun reshaping performance vehicles, with cars like the Tesla Model S Plaid proving that instant torque and blistering acceleration aren't limited to gasoline engines. Even Dodge, one of the last defenders of traditional muscle cars, has announced its move towards electric performance with the upcoming Charger Detune EV. But the real question is, can an electric car truly capture the soul of a muscle car? For many enthusiasts, the thunderous roar of a V8 is just as important as raw speed. While electric vehicles offer unmatched acceleration and efficiency, they lack the visceral, mechanical feel that made classic muscle cars so iconic. Whether electric muscle cars will be embraced by die-hard fans or remain a controversial evolution remains to be seen. One thing is certain: the muscle car, in one form or another, will continue to evolve, just as it has over the past 6 decades. The end of an era, but not the end of the dream. The oil crisis of the 1970s was the turning point that killed the muscle car era, but it didn't kill the muscle car dream. The world changed, and muscle cars had to change with it. While they may never return to the unregulated, fuel-guzzling beasts of the past, their spirit remains in the modern performance cars we see today. The muscle car era may have ended, but the legacy it left behind continues to inspire. So the next time you hear the roar of a classic big block V8, take a moment to appreciate the golden age of American muscle, because once upon a time, nothing on the road could touch it. What do you think? Could the muscle car era have survived under different circumstances? Would you have bought a big block monster in the 60s if you had the chance? Let us know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.